History is about to be made because of Trump's policies, and I believe you should purchase at least 3,500 XRP. And today, I'm going to tell you all why I think that's the case and why this week is likely to be the largest one we've seen in a long time. These are the main things that are taking place right now. On Monday, we could expect the reciprocal reactions regarding Trump's tariffs. The Fed meeting minutes are scheduled for Wednesday, the March CPI inflation data is scheduled for Thursday, the first jobless claims data is scheduled for Thursday, and the March PPI inflation data is scheduled for Friday. In other words, we will be aware of the current status of the U.S. economy, the Fed's intentions in response to it, and the reactions of other nations to Trump's tariffs. All of these are significant for the price movement of XRP in the future, and I'm going to tell you guys that I believe it will be much better than most people are currently expecting. Why do I feel that way? Well, everything appears to be going well when you examine the statements made by a few different nations who have already publicly responded to Trump's sanctions. India says that in order to get around President Trump's tariffs, they would negotiate a new, balanced trade agreement with the U.S. India now plays a crucial role in this since it is a huge industrial center that is comparable to China in certain aspects. However, China currently has complete control over India in that regard. Here's the thing, though. Long-standing geopolitical tensions have existed between China and India. Additionally, if those problems cannot be handled, India may be attempting to fill the void left by China. That's the problem. China, the world's largest economy, is currently responding extremely aggressively to the U.S. economy by hiking tariffs and depending on its other international ties to effectively cover the gap. However, China's playing ball here, which is most likely due to their rivalry with China. Consequently, this might be the answer Trump is searching for. It would be advantageous for both parties if he distanced himself from China and became closer to India, as this would necessitate the removal of all tariffs between the two countries, which appears to be what India desires. And since jobs in India are now far less expensive than they were in China, this would enable another economic boom. I am aware that many Trump supporters are adamant about all manufacturing being done in the United States. This is a fantastic endeavor in my opinion. However, I also understand that this gap must be addressed in the near future because it will take several years for the U.S. to fully recover and resume production. Additionally, this might be the answer. In order to escape President Trump's tariffs, Vietnam is now also promising to erase all duties on U.S. imports. Vietnam is also involved, so it's not just India. I will add that Vietnam's tariffs on the United States of America were wholly unwarranted, and that this is clearly a fantastic step for both of these countries. The fact that they imposed tariffs of up to 80% on goods originating in the United States was completely absurd. In order to safeguard their domestic economy, India too imposed numerous tariffs, but they are now discovering that they were unfair and unbalanced. And for coming out and at least acknowledging that there was a deficit of some sort, I really admire both of these nations. That is an excellent first step in the correct direction. Following Trump's imposition of the 46% duty, Vietnam has now also issued a letter to the president offering to lift the duties. In a letter to the U.S. president that Bloomberg saw, party leader To Lam made the offer, as we can see. In the letter, Lam asked the U.S. to delay the imposition of the tax that Trump announced last week by at least 45 days after April 9th, when it was supposed to take effect, and to refrain from imposing any extra tariffs or fees on Vietnamese imports. Now, the Vietnamese economy will be totally destroyed, which is why Vietnam is frantically approaching Trump here. However, Vietnam must consider one important issue. For a very long time, they have been exploiting the United States by creating enormous deficits. Therefore, Trump's decision to postpone these duties is illogical unless Vietnam immediately lifts its own and begins purchasing more American-made goods. I believe Trump won't have any issues if they forward with this. The deficit must be eliminated. That's what Trump's tariff program is all about. And if they can eliminate the deficit, then more businesses will come to the U.S., less will be stolen from the U.S., and there will be less money and resources available. And, all things considered, a far more balanced trade agreement, exactly what the U.S. needs at this moment. Additionally, according to an Indian government official, India is negotiating a bilateral trade agreement with the U.S. and is not likely to launch a rapid counterattack against President Trump's terrorists. According to the person, India is concentrating its efforts on forging a bilateral trade agreement and is unlikely to reciprocate right away for Donald Trump's imposition of terrorists. The South Asian nation prefers communication to conflict. In addition, the official stated that India enjoys a first-mover advantage over its regional competitors. Correct? Most likely a reference to China. According to the source, India intends to strive for a fair and balanced trade agreement with the US. You may be asking how any of this is actually related to XRP, and there is a lot to answer. You may observe how the markets are impacted each time the tariff fights begin or end, as well as each time a bullish geopolitical statement that eliminates tariffs occurs. The markets benefit greatly from it. Additionally, it is evident that insiders profit greatly from trading on this information. As you can see, this is really crazy. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, sold $234 million worth of stock on February 20th. Warren Buffett revealed a record $334 billion cash balance on February 22. The Nasdaq 100 plummeted by 24% after 30 trading days. So, how were these individuals aware that this would occur? Why do they time these sales so well before making these announcements? You can view the timeline, after all, right here. Jamie Dimon's stock is being sold. Trump claims not to be keeping an eye on the market. Warren Buffett accumulates $334 billion in cash. The auto tariffs and reciprocal duties followed a few days later. Nasdaq then formally moves into bear market zone, correct? It appears that many insiders possess knowledge that the majority of us do not. You can see that over the years a lot of people have been watching Jamie Dimon's purchases and sells of JPM. Additionally, they are typically thought of as a leading sign for the market as a whole. JPM has dropped 25% since Dimon sold, the most since 2022. This is Dimon's second significant 2020 S-pivot. The first was when Dimon joined CNBC during the May epidemic and stated that JPM was extremely valuable in the midst of the crisis. In just 3 weeks, JPM's price had risen 41%. Dimon has made several top and bottom calls. In other words, he sold a significant portion of it for the stock market because he believes that this is the top, at least for the time being. Additionally, we have saw other cryptocurrencies do rather well throughout this time frame, but naturally they have now experienced a large decline. At this point, I believe that the stock market will keep separating from the cryptocurrency markets. Since manufacturing and banking in particular profit directly from all of this global commerce, I believe that the stock markets, especially the bank stocks, will be the ones that suffer the most from these trading disputes, since they are directly involved. In addition to the bank stocks being completely destroyed, we will also witness the collapse of several U.S. industries and the remarkable success of others. It goes without saying that this will devastate companies like Apple, Nike, and those that outsource their manufacturing to countries like China. However, those who are American natives and work in industry will be highly successful. In other words, the oil and gas sector and nearby steel producers have a lot to look forward to. As a result, many more companies will go into certain industries while others will be completely eliminated. In the long run, the Fed will be compelled to lower interest rates, which will increase market liquidity. However, since you can't truly trust these at the moment, I believe that consumers will keep investing in alternative fiat systems that aren't directly influenced. And we witnessed much of the same thing in 2021. They went completely crazy after the Fed lowered interest rates, and individuals poured their money into cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, XRP, and others. Additionally, I believe that this will be extremely similar. A startling 267 million XRP, worth roughly $572 million, is currently being moved to unidentified wallets. The XRP community is now experiencing whale activity. When these whales are active, is the one time you absolutely need